Hi, I'm John Matheson. I was the DP of Gladiator.
Hi, I'm Pietro Scalia. I'm the editor of Gladiator.
This is Ridley Scott. I'm the director of Gladiator. And I think the first thing to say would be to talk about the titles, or the treatment of the titles of DreamWorks and Universal Studios, because we felt when they're in their normal full glory or glorious color that it somehow set up the wrong tone for the film that was about to follow. So Pietro and I basically desaturated this on the Avid and presented it to Walter Parks, fully expecting him to say, absolutely not, you can't touch it, it's absolutely taboo, etc. But actually they bought it into it, and I think it's a very good way of beginning the film.
I thought that the black title of Gladiator was a really bold move and a great idea that you had, really showing the negative space.
It was interesting that the opening titles we had designed, and this is a kind of lesson for filmmakers, that whilst the concept of the title form was really quite elaborate, when in fact all it was meant to be was information to get us into the movie, the title we had first done was too elaborate, and therefore it was too much of a presentation, and so we backed down and returned to just a simple idea of information on screen. Now this hand shot was an afterthought, in the sense that when I'm doing a film, I'm always looking for something that isn't necessarily on the page. And always to me, I'm looking for the subtext. And because we later on, quite late in the script, had developed the theme of mortality, i.e. that the hero would die, that you can't simply have a hero die at the end of a movie. You've got to start that at the beginning. So when he dies at the end, it all seems to make emotionally means seems to make sense. And funnily enough, I was still looking for the theme of that idea that would touch the idea of mortality. And we didn't do this till the last day of shooting in Italy, when I was standing there watching the back of the double of Russell Crowe, who actually wasn't there at that point. It was the figure walking in the wheat field, was stroking the wheat with his hand, and I thought, there it is. So we got a lot of that, and then Pietro put that as the first shot on the movie.
Yeah, I thought it was a poetic way of opening the film. I mean, in the sense to crystallize both the theme and the state of mind of our main character. I mean, basically starting inside of him. I think to start the movie with a close-up of your hero is very strong, but it set somehow maybe the mood or the sensibility. I loved it because how poetic it was, and then the contrast to the cold battlefield.
Well, I don't know. For me, it's said that he was damned from the beginning. I mean, it was like a flash, a premonition of what was the journey he was about to go on, and the circle that was about to be drawn around him and bring him back to that wheat field at the end where he perished.
But there's a very simple geometry to it all once you look at it afterwards. And so you have a theme of mortality, which is a hand. You have later, which we'll touch on when we get to the scene, Marcus Aurelius saying, tell me about your home. And of course what he describes as home, in fact, is the place he most likes to be. So in fact, metaphorically, is heaven. And therefore, then we were illustrating, when you see those premonitions, we are in fact illustrating his home, which is the place he wanted to be. Wanted something really savage here, rather than presenting a bunch of head-bashing barbarians, and just the sound of the chanting of these Germans suggests organization and psychology, which psychology being to frighten the opposition. The African tribes were particularly, the Zulus in particular, were actually had this kind of psychology, so they would frighten the enemy before the enemy even saw them.
Yeah, we used the idea of the Zulus. I mean, the sound, the barbaric sound, as an initial contrast between the organized Romans and which we just mentioned, the psychological fear that the barbarians used with sound and chanting.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's Scottish bagpipes heard by the Germans coming from over the hill. With the wail of the bagpipes, I think used to set the fear of God into them before they even saw, the figures appearing over the hill.
I thought it was also very good to establish the dog at the beginning, which ends up having a bigger role in the battle and helping Maximus out.
Yeah, we always wanted a bigger payoff to the dog because he behaved so well. But somehow we couldn't. I couldn't kill him in the tent of Maximus when he's abducted. It would have been too depressing. I think this shot here is probably the third day or the second day. And
where was we started? You started shooting in February in England. And,
so this is about February the 4th.
Yeah, it was.
Very bad tempered on this morning because what looks to be a perfectly simple scene, which it is really, we had a hell of a job getting the crane into the right position, and then we were losing the light. So there was the last picture of the only good bit of sunlight we got, and it all went kind of muddy, but I think John coped with it very well.
Thank you. No, you were great. I mean, I was worried about these woods and things. Is it going to look like old Germany, or I don't know, one of these Black Forest or wherever they are, somewhere across the Danube? Are the trees big enough? Does it look old enough? It does look. Doesn't look like just southern England, which is rather pleasant. And even this time of year, it wasn't too cold or too vicious, but it looks horrible.
I think it's worth mentioning these war machines. A lot of people are under the impression that all these firing machines are somehow CGI. And of course they're not. They're live. They're real, done absolutely to the scale and design of the Roman war machines. And our art-directed war machines could cast those pots probably about 200 meters. And then the CGI would pick up the flying missile and carry it 1,000 feet to the Germans, where we'd have high explosives in the trees being let off at the right intervals.
Yeah. This battle actually represents a condensed battle of the battles that Marcus Aurelius fought at the German front, basically in Vindobona, which is Vienna.
But again, history is conjecture and frequently rewritten. In fact, we're now going through a whole process, and it seems to be the fashionable modern thing to do is to revisit history and rewrite it. And so whilst we have experts saying sometimes, actually for the most part, the experts have been quite supportive, saying, well, you took a few liberties, but it generally seems to look pretty good. But I always say, how do you know? You weren't there. And therefore what we do is jump back in time into our own imaginations, which is the most important thing to do of all. And in those discussions, endless discussions, would start in art department, start with wardrobe, start with the food that the people eat. You start to evaluate the situation, the condition, and how these people, these soldiers would function. So if you got fire arrows, what is it? Each guy's got a cigarette lighter to light the arrow? No. So what we dig is a little trench. We use black oil and we pour oil into it so they can all dip in. Historians say, I'm not sure that they did that. And we say, well, they'd bloody well do now, right? And it seemed to make sense to me. And that's so the practicality, the need for what you have to do, comes out of that kind of necessity. It's kind of, a lot of this works out as being logical.
It was very difficult, wasn't it? I mean, getting the horses to jump through the fire.
Yeah. I mean, just that little charge down the hill there, well, when you see it full screen with full sound, you get a sense of how hairy it was, because the slope was about 45 degrees. And which is a very nasty position to be on a horse when you're trying to gallop downhill with your armor on, with your sword, avoiding the trees, and you're going 45 degrees down, where the fall is more than, you're 7 feet from horse to ground. And so we had a machine that was built piece by piece to make that tracking shot worthwhile through the trees, which was called, John, what was it
Well, it
called?
was by the company in Sheffield called Camera Tracking Company. It's a sort of rail. We realised we couldn't drive down the hill, we'd lose traction, and we'd turn over if we were in a vehicle, a four-wheel drive vehicle. So they laid this track down, which is very high speed. Well, it responds very quickly because a horse gets up to, gallop very quickly, and it was ideal to just chase the horses. And
That moment in the battle, which was when they're all on foot, and they're all gradually getting covered in mud, and they're all starting to look like the same team, people must have killed each other. So, I mean, on the same side. So, as in modern war, you get killed. You get accidents with friendly fire. That was an example of friendly fire where he bumped back to back to one of his centurions and nearly killed him. That, again, seems to be logical. Turning brutality into, now with, I think, Hans Zimmer's score here, which was, Pietro, you may want to say something about that.
Well, I wanted to mention about, the kind of impressionistic images that, the battle transcends to, or moves to, how John and you decided to use a different aperture angle on the aperture and creating that staccato effect.
Well, what we're looking at now is a thing that we did very quickly at the end of one day, and you can see the lights going. It's actually lit by the flames, which is beautiful and perfect. But I mean, it wasn't that's all we had to do, and by we talked about different apertures and speeds, and this little bit now is all shot 6 and 8 frames to slow it down, and it also gave us a better exposure, so we could carry on shooting into the afternoon or the evening. But this bit, as the battle winds down, was at that speed, and the other stuff, which you saw was a bit more frenetic, was shot at normal speed with a narrower shutter angle. And that made the swords and the violence and the mud flying around and the thrashing much more frenetic. Suddenly people seemed to be carrying a sword with many blades as they swung it through the air, as opposed to a normal sweep which you'd get with if you let a camera run normally. And we found it enhanced the aggressiveness of the scene.
Do you think he's really dying?
So now you have the royal children, Lucilla and Commodus. I always had in mind this actor, Joaquin Phoenix, for Commodus. I felt he was it, and whilst we had to go through the usual process of testing, he proved to be the one that was right for the part. And I liked him because he had a certain wounded quality, metaphorically wounded quality, which I thought was always more interesting, not to just have a person who is a bad person or who is a manipulative person. They're always more interesting if you get a sense that there's a reason for this, there's a reason why. And of course we gradually find this out as the first act unfolds. He has a degree and a quality of kind of innocence as well, which makes him kind of very interesting. The sister, Lucilla, is, if she'd been Egyptian, probably an empress. Because she was Roman, that would be impossible.
Did you enhance his darkness under his eyes?
Yeah, makeup, we made him pale, and we made the eyes extremely dark, almost bruised, effect to suggest maybe, fragile health, but also to have this rather inbred look.
Menacing as well.
Yeah. This was an idea that I always thought was amusing, because the whole point of the little bird at the beginning of the battle, apart from in brief saying, well, life carries on while people are going to tear each other apart and cut each other's heads off, the irony was to be that I was on that handle of that sword which he'd left in the tree, which of course he'd go and retrieve. In these days, that would be a $10,000 sword, or $10,000 special weapon. Of course he'd go back and find it, or his Batman would. And therefore, the idea for that was I was always going to have that same bird standing on his sword handle, which is ironic for him. And that's why that little smile at the beginning of the film, well, they kind of acknowledge each other. Then he acknowledges this little bird at the end of the battle, but on reflection, that was too cute.
The introduction of Marcus Aurelius was beautiful. I mean, we saw him top of the hill at first, but I like the light and the snowflakes when he addresses.
Yeah, we got real snow. In fact, the first few lines used to be, which we cobbled together, we were a little short on things for generals to say to officers in the briefest possible way. So the day before, we were trying to decide what that would be. And Russell there was one line I wanted him to walk up and say, looks up at the grey sky and says, you know, more or less looks like snow. And the reply was, well, that would hamper us, or that would slow us down. And right in the middle of the battle, by God, it started to snow. So we had to then supplement it thereafter with these prop department snowflakes, which are simply rolls of paper, which you burn like candles, and the pieces blow in the air, and you're witnessing now artificial snow, which actually looks rather good. So now you have the beginning and sense of the fragile relationship of the emperor to his son. And I always felt that it wasn't altogether the son's makeup or fault. Partly the father's to blame.
But you can sense the intimacy that he has with his general, with Russell.
The favored son is Maximus, clearly, and which already, of course, makes this one, Commodus, feel even more insecure. You get the Judas complex here, where he comes in and washes his hands of blood, having been in battle. I always felt that, well, historians will say, well, they would go and bathe and put on soft garments and come and recline and eat grapes. And I thought, no way, Jose, this should be actually the direct visit after the rugby match, or where you're covered in mud and blood for those who could stand. And he has already done his walk around his hospital looking at his wounded that we shot, but which made relevance the fact he would see his men were comforted before he then had his duty, which was to come and meet the boys in the mess hall or in the tent, where the king would be present and they'd still be standing muddied and bloodied. That's why you get the hand washing.
Well, the hospital scene was very harrowing.
Yeah.
It was very, real or vicious.
Yeah, but that'll be in this DVD. The hospital stuff will be in the DVD on it, Pietro. But it shows that when you take time to get to this next phase in the storytelling process, it took too long, and therefore that's why we simply lifted out the hospital and went straight to this.
I want to mention this was Joaquin's first scene.
First night.
First night, and his terror. I mean, wearing the uniform and finding this
He was
place.
terrified. Joaquin was always terrified. I think as soon as he put on the uniform, he stared at himself in the mirror and nearly died with fright, wondering if he could come up to this character, which I think he did. I was very pleased with what he did.
The orders are obeyed and the battle's won. But these senators scheme and squabble and flatter and deceive.
Russell really just slides straight into the character and the armor and everything, the period, the time. And as we've seen in the film, he really is a very strong screen presence.
Yeah, I mean, even from the first shot, from his first close-up, his adoration, from his men in the battlefield, his courage. Then even in this scene, returning to the theme of him being a farmer.
Yeah. That theme of, you see, farmer, though, rolls into the idea that he squats every time before a battle and takes a piece of the dirt from the ground. There's a logic to that, and that links with, well, you'd think, why is that? Why is he literally smelling the earth? To me, it's mortality, the possibility of death on this particular day. It's a habit. Maybe it's a good luck process. Maybe it's a talisman to get the dirt on his hands of the battle that is about to begin, because if he dies, he will be buried in this earth. At the same time, it ties into the fact as a farmer, he may squat and feel the earth and smell the earth, of his land. So that all rolls itself into one, you know, thread for this man who will eventually die.
More than ever. Enough of politics. Let us pretend.
I thought Richard Harris was absolutely wonderful in this, and it was a really, even though I say so myself, perfectly chosen. There were one or two others that could have done it, but not like this. And in fact, the spin up in my head, the toss up in my head was, I need a really, to excuse the expression, shit-kicking kind of character to be Proximo. And at one stage, I was thinking about Richard as that Proximo character. As you know, we have very few Robert Shaws today, and Richard Harrison is certainly that. But just somehow he's more scholarly now, and therefore he seemed to be more appropriate to Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, he always has that look of a king or an emperor.
Yep. Suggestion of potential, of capability here. The argument always was, well, what does this do? Should we cut it out? And I said, absolutely not. I don't want to get to the third act where we see Commodus say to him, and Maximus says to him, you would fight me, and you have absolutely no suggestion that Commodus is capable in any way with a piece of steel. Right there is an investment for the third act. There's a kind of logic usually in everything when the structure is correct.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, I remember.
I think it's worth talking about absolutely major contribution by Arthur Max to the set. You know, everything you're looking at was Arthur and his cohorts, his troops, which was the art department. Everything you see, you can't go and rent a Roman chair. You can't really go and rent swords. You can, but usually they've been done for some past, you know, cheaper by definition of what it is, you know, television series or something. And so, and you never get them in quantity. So everything you see is made or hired at quite great expense, actually. But this tent is a royal tent, which has corridors and living rooms and courtyards. We'll see the courtyard in a minute. Again, we just worked this out of logic. How would, if I was an emperor, where you have everyone doing everything you want to snap of your fingers, and you're in very inclement weather and an inclement climate, how would you live? And that's what you got to look at. That's what you got to feel. And they haven't got showers either, right? So the heating must have been certainly a little shaky. So you might not shower every day. You'd probably just wear layers of clothes. Did everybody pong? Probably.
But it also shows that that these campaigns, these war campaigns, would last for years. So they would take everything with them, and that was close to them.
Well, he was 17 years on the front, and in that time, you only had 4 years of peace. German front. The Germans he could not pull them into line the way he wanted them to be in all the time he was an emperor. And of course, ironically, the Germans finally came back and sacked Rome.
It will not survive the winter. Maximus.
In this scene, he's telling him about his health and his demise, and suggesting that he might not survive much longer, and therefore he's no longer going to, he no longer considers his son to be heir, and wants Maximum to be, like, if you like, a temporary prince consort or consort to the empire until the Senate get everything into line and decide on a predecessor.
Jasmine in the evening.
On a successor, I should say.
Through the gate is a giant poplar. Figs, apples.
Here's heaven. He's describing his home.
Black like my wife's hair. Grapes on the
And of course, Hans Zimmer's music is underscoring and telling us something else about the fact that it's maybe more than just home.
2 years, 264 days.
the signature voices of Lisa Gerard, you know, representing his wife and family.
But that right there is, it doesn't matter how good or excellent performance is, if you can also add to that appropriate score, it can push things even further.
To become the protector of Rome after I die. I will empower you to one end alone.
Music to me is like, I always said, Hans, this, I realized, well, you know, not from the very beginning, but when I started making movies, that to me, but music, I realized, appropriately chosen when it's working is like the final dialogue that goes on to a movie, because it should work hand in hand with story and dialogue and be a servant to the dialogue and a servant to the story. But I believe music's more powerful than that and works on your subconscious and on your emotions the way speaking and pictures don't.
It's almost like an invisible character
Yeah.
present,
Yeah.
and almost like the viewer being
Yeah.
in the scene
Yeah.
with the character.
People say, well, yeah, good score is when you don't notice it. I say bullshit. I'm very conscious of a good score, and I'm very conscious of a bad score. And anyone who says that does not know, simply doesn't know music.
He knows that you command the loyalty of the army.
When Hans did the first score suggesting the theme for the brother and sister, he played it, and we listened, and he said, what do you think? and all I could think was, I said, I hear 1,000 years, and it's genetic. And he just grinned. He said, that's it. And now that's a totally abstract thing to come out with, and that's what he hoped for, right?
My father favors you now.
My lady,
'Twas not always so.
many things change.
She can be my empress anytime. I thought she was one of the very few actresses around today that has this kind of regal quality and intelligence and elegant sexuality.
You seem upset.
I lost many men.
What did my father want with you?
Very simple scene here, which is really on the surface about what does my father want, and he's fundamentally saying, well, it's none of your business, because he doesn't trust her. But you've got a great subtext to this scene. So at the end of this short scene, you know, even though it's never said, there was a relationship. The relationship was very strong, and somebody wounded somebody here, or maybe they wounded each other. Is she manipulative? Definitely. She's a manipulator, very clever
Is it really
survivor.
so terrible seeing me again?
No, I'm
I
tired.
thought the scene was great just between the two. I
Lets
mean,
you to
like
see
you
my
said,
father
the
so
subtext, the eyes, how they look at each other and cross, also
Commodus
suggesting
expects that my father will
past
announce his succession in
relationship.
days.
And she's very good, and
Well, you
Russell as
served my
well.
brothers, you served
Just
his father.
follow the eyes.
I will always serve Rome.
Do you know?
This courtyard behind them is almost Kurosawa,
Oh, yes.
with the stitched panels of canvas you see through there. It's almost Japanese. Or where did the Japanese get their idea from? The steppes, Mongolia. It's all about survival in certain climates and practicality of movement. And then, if you're rich, comfort.
You'll be nearly 8 years old.
And so all these structures were, whilst had never set eyes on each other, are all similar.
Thank you for your prayers. Ancestors,
Here's his servant who's making him a
Blessed Mother, come to me.
whatever, either tea with herbs or something with a little bit of more in it before he sleeps. And he's praying to his casket, which is in which he has several gods.
His ancestral figures,
Yeah.
figurines.
Yeah.
It was important. I mean, the ancestor, the people that died in his family.
You know, we never intended a flashback or flash. We never intended initially to see the wife. We always thought, talk about it, but don't see her. But then it meant when you meet their demise or see their demise, we don't want to look at the whole charred figure. You want to really have that played off screen. And therefore you never see her. So we figured we better have something that normally I wouldn't do, but in this instance I think it worked pretty well.
Yeah, it was just to plant a visual seed.
Sometimes I do what I want to do. The rest of the time, I do what I have to.
People have asked me, the servant scars, if those were makeup or real.
They were real.
Do you know the story of how that...
Tommy, yeah. Well, he's from Glasgow, and I think he probably had that collected those scars in a brawl. Not that Tommy's a brawler.
No, I think someone wanted his leather jacket or something. That's what he told me, and he didn't want to give it to him.
Yeah. Okay, this is one of my favorite scenes of the movie. And this really underscores the relationship between the two fathers. I think this is one of the best written scenes in the movie.
Are you ready to do your duty for Rome?
Yes, Father.
You will not be emperor.
Very simple statement of fact. You could have elaborated and gone round and round in circles, but he just comes out with it.
To hold in trust.
And the boy contains it very elegantly, but now we see that he's really upset.
Rome is to be a republic again.
You know, historically, Commodus was always portrayed as a kind of lunatic who would prance around in a dried out, cured lion's hide and to propagate the idea that he was Hercules reincarnated. Whether that was propaganda or real in his own mind, either way, he was very manipulative or simply crazy. And Joachim and I decided that we didn't want to go down that route. We never wanted to see debauchery. We never wanted to see reclining and eating grapes. We never wanted to see eating or drinking too much. But instead, look at this character from the point of view of someone who really believes that he could actually run the empire and be a successor to his father.
I thought that the Marcus Aurelius bust in the back is kind of like the shadow or the image of his father, being always on top of him. And I love the composition of this scene. And
it's between the live Marcus and the representation, the marble representation.
To make you proud.
But this speech of Joachim's is just great, wonderful, about the four virtues.
You pressed me to your chest and held me tight. It would have been like the sum of my heart for 1,000 years.
But he's one of those actors who's always in denial of his talent, and is always self-searching and saying, I did it wrong, I did it badly. But that's what makes him tick. That's what makes him interesting.
Commodus? Your faults as a son is my failure as a father.
Now that's Richard's line. He came to me between takes, or before we'd rehearsed the scene, we'd gone for lunch, we were going to come back, and he said, I've been thinking about this. This needs a pinning. And he said, what do you think of this? So he came up with that line. I thought it was perfect. And the thing about the scene was, interestingly, the choices you make is that I figured if the king hadn't knelt, if the father didn't kneel, he would have been alive. The fact he knelt and did this emotional reaching out to his son, the son had never seen that before in his life and therefore didn't like it. It made him feel uncomfortable. And that was right there became the loss of respect for the father, although he still loved him.
There's a mistake there as well, though, isn't it? It's an embrace that gets out of hand. It's just,
yeah, he doesn't begin.
Madness,
he doesn't begin with the idea of saying, "I'm going to murder my father." It starts off with a kiss of meeting of the two emotionally, and which develops into him murdering his father. Always sleeps with a knife. There it is.
Maximus, the Emperor needs you.
I think even in Roman camps with generals, even with guards, they would probably sleep with their own weapon.
Men with me, brother. great father is dead.
Okay, here we've got the genetic music coming up. Here we have 1,000 years of bloodline.
It has the ancient quality to it.
Yeah. One of my favorite pieces of score here. Listen to this.
The wolf in the distance.
How did he die?
This is one of my favorite
Surgeons
shots
say
where
there was
she's
no pain.
introduced. Just pans
His
over
breath
to
came
her.
out as he slept.
It's his father. And that's meant to be between him and Marcus
Your
Aurelius.
emperor asked for your loyalty,
But it
Maximus.
hits, again, hits Commodus
my
like a
hand.
knife.
I only offer it once.
A little feeling about the Godfather here, actually. I think a lot of the structure of the mafia was probably partly based on, isn't that right, Pietro? Roman structure.
Yeah, I mean the fact that the unity
Yeah.
of the family is the most important thing.
Yeah.
And
Here she comes. The sister comes out of the dock here.
he's just wonderful, looking with his eyes. And
Good moment here
Yes.
because you think they're complicit, but they're not. She couldn't hit him, so we had to put a bigger soundtrack on.
there was always a question: should she slap him or should she just kiss the hand?
Yeah.
And ultimately, we felt that as a sister, she would slap him because she disapproves of
Hail
what he
Caesar.
might have done.
I must talk to the
But
senators.
the kissing of the hand approves her.
But she's entirely vulnerable. She's now at the mercy of her brother. There's no father in between. And she doesn't know where her brother's going to come from next. So she's already being political with her brother by kissing his hand. It's then, in a sense, kneeling before the emperor or kneeling before the Godfather.
Guards,
Because if you do what he just did, then she doesn't know him anymore,
please don't fight,
right?
Maximus.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, Caesar has spoken. Right until dawn.
Now this is something that's not on paper. What follows next?
Look at me!
This is just constructed in the editing room what happens next. Which was, in this kind of film, is unusual where you go off into a kind of dream, abstract, flashback, flash forward, which takes you right through to the demise of the family, him being picked up and arriving and being sold as a slave. Was always one of those areas that all you can do is just film it and make it up. Because the kind of thing doesn't really go on paper. And I didn't want it to be the traditional, hero meets demise, and it can never be that clean. I think it's got to be nearly mystical. Again, touching on finally the theme of mortality. So there's a subtext to everything from what happens beyond this, his condition in the next sequence. So he's grabbed the sharp blade, so his hands must be bleeding now, which they are. The sword gets stuck in the leather scabbard. Bang. So now we see a character in preparation for becoming a gladiator. 4 against 1. He's very economical in how he deals with people. Doesn't put himself in danger unless he has to. Samurai. Even to the armor. Samurai. And then who hit who? The soldier's going to come back. No, he took him out. And there you see the blood in the hands. That's when he grabbed the sword. But he hit him under the leaves of the armor. Took a giant slice in his arm. So this is a big, kind of anxious stretch here for me, because logically, and I'm a logician, I'm come from always the logic and the truth, and that's what makes it stronger. You've got a 1,500-mile to ride here, which always bothered the hell out of me, to get home, and how were the Praetorians getting there ahead of him, and you're looking at least a 3.5 to 4 week ride. And finally, we just let the magic of film take over, and you can't turn this into a second act. You just want to get on with the story and find out what happened to the family. We shot all this after being in Malta.
Yeah, we never, as you say, never.
This was in California. This.
Yeah, Lone Pine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Never sorted out the journey. Started in England, and then we found there was no real views in Malta that had this sort of landscape. So we had to.
There you go. That's why you got a Lone Pine.
Yeah, that doesn't exist in the 9 Mile Island.
And so the main heart of his journey was happening here. When he gets to his family, the end of the family, that's in Malta. This is in Italy. This is in Tuscany, which we shot on the very last 2 days of shooting. Family, child, servants, and idyllic. And those are the people we've forgotten about. These are the Praetorians.
This was one of the difficult sections of the film. How to restructure his ride home, the Praetorians riding, him getting the premonition, who's going to get there first, knowing what is happening, something terrible about to happen. And I think on the DVD you'll see your original version.
Oh, the spin around, yeah.
Spin around in the desert.
I always thought that was the best way of doing it, but nobody got it but you and I.
Well, I liked it.
Yeah, sorry, John, you liked it. 3 against everybody else. We just gave up on that one.
But this was, I guess, like you said, economical and straightforward in a way, linear way of saying all those elements.
I like happens. I love what happens. It became a trade-off of, well, we don't get the spin around, but the trade-off was I got to have him doing his weird. What happens, which follows when in a moment, you'll find out what happens to his family. Here we are. This is Malta. Now we're back in Malta.
Lone Pine to Malta.
Yeah. Well, we have no house. We have 2 pots and some trees.
Rhododendron.
Yeah. What are they? Rhododendrons.
Yeah, no one watered them. Yeah.
And here we have
we ate the chickens.
chickens. We had chickens for lunch. And that's the villa right there. That's minimal art direction. We brought all this in, dropped it in the landscape where we could burn something. That's it.
But it's a beautiful shot. It's a
big
down.
Yeah, a big shadow of the house that doesn't exist, and then
kind of took it off the searches. John Ford is still one of my great heroes in terms of how he handles, and lean and Ford, giant landscapes, and then close-ups of very personal stories in giant canvases. Because then you can get at the hero character, and he's not swamped by everything. Because after all, this is a very personal story.
I think Russell did a great job.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever commented on the fact of it.
Oh no, he said
the snot.
No, we go off on one side. He says, "What do you want?" He said, so I said, "I want snot, tears, the worst condition you've ever been," and he said, "Snot." I said, "Snot." He said, "You got it." So I don't know what he was doing back there, but he was sitting on the ground. And when he did it, I went, "Oh." But then actually, that was the first take, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's the best. Here you have the Jabla Hula Hula, and that little curly toe tells you that they are not from Spain. Here we go. I love this sequence. Love that moment of black.
Yeah. Should have been longer. But
that very simple effect here is him lying on his back. People say, "Wow, that's a great CGI shot." He's not. He's on a plank on a track, 3 inches off the ground. John's got enough stop to give his face, his nose sharp right through to the pebbles. So it's a rather disturbing angle of passage. That floating on the pebbles is passage. In other words, the potential of death. But then you find, he is floating on the ground. He's on a wagon on his back, and the desert's passing behind his head. Logic to everything.
Yeah, and his hand bringing him back to the real earth.
It goes back to the same image you mentioned before, the hand, the symbol of touching the earth.
Yeah.
Him being in a stage of transcendence between life and death.
Stops himself dying by. That's the key in there for those who get it. Most people don't get it, but this is the time to hear it. Is his hand comes down, he drags his hand through the pebbles. In fact, that's bringing himself back because he was on the edge. He was definitely on the edge.
Yeah, he just touches them, then digs in and grabs.
Yeah. There's his boyfriend.
Don't die.
Great faces.
They'll feed you to the lions. They'll whip more than we are.
And those little shots were all done the first day we were there by Clemens. It was freezing cold. We come from freezing England to freezing desert, high
It's about
desert.
50 degrees there, wasn't it?
So it was horrible. I didn't bring any clothes. I had to buy local Arab gear to keep warm, but it was absolutely freezing here.
But look at German, he's naked.
Well, it warmed up by then, but first.
But I loved Morocco. Absolutely loved Morocco. It was clean, clear, a great place to go, but probably try to avoid midsummer. Spring and autumn, it's just beautiful.
Zuckerbar actually.
Oh, look, we should talk about this. This is built. This is Arthur Max's design and built with Benjamin Fernandez, and in fact Benjamin, was the art director on this sequence, and Arthur Max was the overlord, was the production designer, with all their team of dressers, and there was a lot more going on in this sequence actually, but again we felt stretched too far, too long. We cut it down because these two were taken on a walk through lion cages, and it demonstrated how there were tradesmen who would actually buy and sell animals as well as slaves, as human.
Yeah, I mean, this is a real traditional, wonderful Arabic bazaar with all the travellers and the camel trains arriving to sell their wares.
I always felt I missed this slightly, though. I felt I missed we missed it somehow because the story doesn't let you get in there, and if you get in there, you want to remove it because it's taking too long. So it becomes catch-22. So it goes straight. We've just lost about 5 or 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And now we'll cut straight to
this wonderful face.
Yeah, straight to the heart of the matter, which is really what this is about.
It's Oliver, isn't it?
Yeah. But look at that village on the hill behind him. That's real.
Oh no, I bought him from.
But you get enough of the feel of the maybe the marketplace, the sound that we put in there with the flies, the rotten meat and.
That line there, he says, "I was a hunter," and he says, "No, it wasn't. I found him in the salt mines." I mean, why wouldn't he say, "Yes, he was a hunter"?
Because the hunter suggested he may be dangerous. And they would sometimes not buy a slave if they felt he was dangerous, wanted him to be harmless and servile.
That's 5,000 per no print.
And here's Rotten Russell.
Yeah, Russell as a shell of himself, still, either alive or dead, but basically dead as a man.
This is a real house with additions, with the gate. This is a palace, kind of equivalent of a medieval castle. In fact, it's not medieval. It's probably only about 300 years old, but it looks much more ancient than that. Worth talking about Proximo here. I hadn't seen Oliver for 27 years, and I was thinking, who is there out there who can do this character and be outrageous enough and also physical, and a sense of being physically dangerous. And I thought, well, why not Ollie? And so I hadn't seen him for a few years, so we met, and there it was.
Great face, great presence.
Yeah.
The white beard.
Yeah. And who was to ever believe that he would die during the movie, which is a great loss to us all. But I'm glad that the movie has been successful. So it's like a nice final curtain for him. Rolf Müller from Germany, great buddy of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Is a gentleman of great humor, and very, very sweet despite his size. I'm not sure, but was Rolf Mr. Universe?
Oh, it must have been. Look at him.
Yeah, no, I think he was literally Mr. Universe. I think that's why. Maybe the subtext is Arnold took him under his wing to help him, and then Rolf got into television and things in Germany. And I'd met Rolf at Arnold's house, oh God, 2 years ago. And I thought, I need a giant, a really big man who's physically good shape and has at least had some acting experience. And so I remembered Rolf, and that's how he got the role.
And he's enormous. I mean,
Yeah.
much bigger than Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, intimidating, actually, because Russell's 6'1", is he?
I don't know. Yeah, he's.
Maybe 6 feet. Rolf is probably 4 inches taller than 6'4".
I think he's bigger. He's,
Yeah. This is inside the actual, medieval castle that we saw earlier. And so these are actual rooms, which would...
We all have to fight.
Russell's taken on the role of a character who doesn't speak at this particular moment, right through the middle act, and this scene underscores that fact because the Jaimin character is asking him, why do you want to fight? We all have to fight. And I think Jaimin's role really blossomed during the film because, oddly enough, the Jaimin character always came in and asked the most pertinent questions on an emotional level. And then, of course, it seemed to be totally appropriate that he would have the last word, but we'll actually come to that when we get there. This red stuff, in fact, was the dye market, the wool, where they had to walk, because they stretched poles across the streets and let the dye drip down and as it's drying out, which is, again, embellishment on...
Well, you can still see it in parts of
those birds are CGI, and but everything else is real.
You built the arena.
We built the arena attached to the little town.
Some that you can't fight. They all say that. Until they're
And this is part of the utilization of the set. This is actually really under the arena.
Yeah, this is in the innards of the set of the arena, which is where all the prisons would be, the service parts would be.
thrust this into another man's flesh.
We mixed cultures, and here with wardrobe, and it's worth talking about Janty Yates, who did all the wardrobe in the film, everything, the armor, the everything you see that people wear were made. And my only criticism I got from an expert was she snapped that Roman women didn't wear colors, they only wore white. And I was going, okay. And, basically, was that written? Is it real?
Who knows?
Who really knows? It's like saying in London we only wear bowler hats,
Here again with the hands in the dirt, kind of
the reawakening.
Awakening. That again, death was more important to the Romans than the actual life. So it was important how you die, and that's what Proximo is trying to tell Maximus.
Where we'd found this valley, this little dell, dip bowl, just at the edge of the Kasbah, which was this Tamdok or?
Atbin Hadu, I think.
Atbin Hadu.
Was this Atbin Hadu? I think it was, yeah. No,
and on the location we found the little dell, which was seated, probably at one stage was probably a waterhole, but it was big enough to actually put in a medium-sized arena with its kind of Roman grandeur in a gnarly way. And so historically this arena probably would have been there if the Colosseum at this juncture was, the actual Colosseum was only 200 years old, but these arenas had predated the Colosseum, so this arena could be 300 years old. All gambling and entertainment. Probably started out as some kind of fairly harmless form of theatre. I think that's how Colosseums started out, as entertainment and theatre, music, theatrical presentations, gradually building up into the use of prisoners from the empire, vagrants, religious fanatics would be called Christians, and gradually just developed into bloody theatre.
It was Etruscan, I think, originally.
Yeah.
Was the Minotaur's head actually a real cow head?
No, fiberglass, and built on a frame, and then a helmet, and all these helmets are probably built around, they're fiberglass actually, but they look really great. You see, this one's built around a motorcycle helmet, so he's got a nice piece of padding underneath there. And that actress, you know, when you sell a blow, it's not the deliverer, it's the receiver that sells the blow, and then the sound between, you know, pushes it home. So that guy flicking his head as if he's receiving a giant bash on the head from a huge manacle is him selling it. We had to cut out the actual fact there, which is we're seeing Rolf stick him on one of those spikes. Was one of our things we had to concede in the rating, with the ratings board. But you know, a lot of this violence that they talk about is so much part of what the story is and so much part of the period and what they actually used to do. But I think what the tricks they got up to, in fact, historically, were far worse than anything we attempt in this. Things which are actually unspeakable. You wouldn't really want to talk about what they did in the Colosseum. Transition to, and people say, well, this is Leni Riefenstahl, and this is, you know, straight off the, what is it? The
Triumph of the Will.
Triumph of the Will. Now, I always say, well, excuse me, but they copied the Romans, so you've got it the wrong way around. CGI and real combination. All this was done really rather quickly because the whole film of shooting was only, I think, 18 weeks, which for a film of this scale meant that everybody was really moving rather quickly. And
this was done in mostly a day. Though.
This was a day. All this was a day.
They didn't really want us to do this.
Yeah. And it's always an act of faith because you're shooting stuff that you think, I know where all the shortfalls are, but I'm hoping that these linking bits will then join us to post-production later, which will make this next shot work, which is the, you know, the center of the approach to the palace and the Colosseum in the background.
Which is based on St. Peter's Square.
St. Peter's Square, yeah.
Little columns, and then that first shot there, in fact, is a still of a model in Rome.
We shot all this stuff in the Colosseum to get high enough back and get the sandy floor, and in fact the steps that these people were standing on to receive these two, those steps aren't there. There were only 4 steps from the ground. So where he's coming up from about 4 feet below them, and everything else is fabrication. Everything else is blue screen. So it's very difficult to describe that as to what you're doing, and they're all looking at you at the corner of your eye, cynically going, "Oh yeah," you know.
Well, you used the sets you could though, didn't you? We built some stairs in the Colosseum, and and there were stairs outside the palace that you did hobble together.
But you just you have to that's the interesting thing about making period films, is that you're creating a world which is really a challenge in itself, and is really one of the most fascinating things about doing period or science fiction. That's what always attracts me.
I love this scene. This is like one of the paintings you showed me. I can't remember what it was. It was another one of those 18th century French things with all these guys standing around with their
robes,
togas, and their shocking scarlet. And
I like the black marble granite.
That's great.
The columns.
We got to Malta a little early, and we got to Malta. It was actually really quite cold with high winds, and of course all these sets are pavilions, which means they have open roofs. They're open to the elements. Which is an interesting question in Roman times, that it must have been quite cold. So people walking around must have wrapped up. Did they wear kind of socks? They must have. Did they have heaters everywhere? Absolutely. Because they didn't have glass, they didn't have glazing, did they? They had vellum, like skin, polished to near translucency, but no, the technology of glass windows hadn't been thought about. Derek Jacobi, who people will remember from the kind of very celebrated television show done by BBC years ago called I, Claudius.
Comes back to Rome as a senator.
Yeah.
Leave your list with me.
But it's Joaquin being the leery little teenager spinning his sword and having no real respect for them.
Yeah. I always like this tracking shot through because you get a sense of domesticity at a Roman empirical level. I wouldn't mind having a pavilion like that in Los Angeles. Now it's an intimate scene between brother and sister. I never really got those films where they'd have servants all standing around the background listening to the most intimate conversations. Where you'd say, well, why is that guy standing there in the background? Because what they're talking about is such material of such gigantic gossip or value or political intrigue. Surely they'd ask him to leave the room.
Or put them to death.
Yeah, but they were there, they were chatting away with the servant, with the spear carrier in the background, taking it all in.
I wanted to mention how you maximized the location. I mean, this was actually the same area where you shot the Senate scene.
Yeah.
But it appears as on the wing of the palace.
Yeah, this in fact is what you just looked at. We just looked at the emperor, the guys, the scene with the spinning sword was literally 25 feet to the left. But I think, you know, when you've been an art director and you're dealing with an art director as accomplished as Arthur, you know you can play tricks and games. And what we'd done was worked all this out on a... We'd taken... I knew a location existed in Malta from having shot on the tanks 5 years ago. I walked up one lunchtime from the studio to look at this ruin. The ruin was an 19th century, early 19th century ruin, which was English barracks of army fighting against Napoleon, 1803. They had purpose-built the barracks, which included giant parade grounds, infrastructures, buildings, etc., all in Roman style and all in limestone. Of course, the last 200 years have gradually eroded with the prevailing winds, and the limestone have worn it away so it looks quite ancient. So a lot of what you look down on there is partly real and partly set. For the most part, mostly set, of course. But we dropped sets in amongst real buildings. This here in the middle is the actual center of this parade ground. And then CGI, that's a helicopter shot. CGI came in and elaborated on that aerial view, which is the stadium view.
Quite a spectacular shot. I mean, really.
Cafes. Historians say, we don't think they were cafes. I've heard that Nero used to go and shoplift for fun. And of course, he would dress up, go shoplifting, and shopkeepers couldn't say anything because it was Nero. And as soon as you get information like that, you think, well, what else used to happen? And so we started, here's the first coffee bar in Roman history. We decided we'd make cafes, and off the painting Jean-Léon Gérôme, I got the juggler, who was actually with the Egyptian headdress juggling away. And then we had, like a street trader, then we had another scene in here, which was a sequence you'll see on the DVD, which was the spy exchange. I always really liked the sequence that we removed. Again, it took too long, but it was with Oliver Reed, and it was how Oliver sees and spots that he's being followed by
Commodus's spies.
Commodus men. It just gave a that's pretty good, isn't it? 3,000 tribesmen at 9 o'clock in the morning. You don't often get to do that.
It was 5,000.
And they were all real. They'd come out of the desert, and we said we'd give you food and food for the animals. And when I was driving in that morning at like whatever it was, 5:45 a.m., the road was clogged with 4,000 tribesmen.
These guys look great. They're real heavy antibody.
By the time I'd finished with this film, I wouldn't have minded living in Roman times, actually. I mean, that is to say, providing I was really rich.
You have your own arena.
Oh, I was right into it. I thought, this is good stuff. The food is pretty good. The wine and the oil was great. And I'm an architectural freak, so I loved all the architecture and the...
So this movie is really about you then?
Yeah,
it's the general farmer.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't like to have been a gladiator, man.
Mm.
They didn't object to that shot.
No, because the guy's head's encased. You see, you can't see a human being. That's always slightly bizarre, but I don't really know how they work the difference out. But we made the head slightly comical, i.e. the pig's head with the tusks, just in case we had a big argument. Nobody ever mentioned it. So now he's...
It's a changed Maximus.
Yep.
He doesn't understand that even though he despises the crowd, they still love him.
Yeah.
Which kind of is the beginning of his myth, or he's a great gladiator.
What do you want? Girl? Boy?
You sent for me?
Yes, I did. You're good, Spaniard, but you're not that good.
What was nice about this character, I think, which is also informative and kind of accurate, was they had these people who had businesses who... And I reckon that Proximo probably plundered the North African coast, and may have actually gone down into Africa to looking for animals, exotic animals. At the same time, he would raid villages and take prisoners and slaves that some would prove to be valuable to him to be in the arena. So it's like he had a racing stable of gladiators.
So finally, after 5 years of scratching a living in
There was a shot of Proximo eating honey-covered butterflies, and
yeah.
I'm sorry we lost that one.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think I'd have liked to have been Proximo, actually. I think that would have been great.
50,000 Romans.
A great scene between the two.
Every movement of your sword. Willing you to make that killer
So we find out he was a gladiator, of course.
Silence before you strike.
But he does it so well. He really pushes it home.
It rises up like a storm. As if you were the thunder god himself.
You were a gladiator?
Yes, I was.
One of Oliver's best speeches there, I think.
You won your freedom?
A long time ago, the Emperor presented me with a Meridius. It's just a wooden sword.
And there's the Meridius we had to put in because we used that near the end.
He was supposed to use that sword at the end, but unfortunately he died before that.
Yeah. Yeah, the thought originally was that Proximo would have the final word as the man of all seasons, if you like, who survived everything and went on to do whatever he did, and but always would remain a rascal as opposed to a villain. A rascal somehow is more sympathetic. And of course we couldn't, because about 3 weeks before the end he died.
So he was going to bury the sword in the end.
Yeah, he was going to bury the sword in the arena.
The sand,
in his honor of Maximus.
A symbol of freedom.
Yeah.
I will win the crowd. I will give them something they've never seen before.
So, Spaniard, we shall go to Rome together and have bloody adventures. And the great whore will suckle us until we are fat.
I like that, and the great whore will suckle us.
Yeah.
When enough men had died,
Oliver used to get quite carried away, actually, and he got very carried away in this scene. He really, really believes what he was saying, what he was doing. He literally just becomes the character, and would always stay with it during the day. He would stay with that character throughout the process.
And that was his armor that he wore as a gladiator?
Probably. It's not exactly a new device, and it was a device that we thought was important when you're talking about these things, and then it never really came over that he had made that his breastplate and made that where he was putting his own silver work onto the breastplate, where eventually he talks to the boy and talks about his 2 horses, which are Scato and Argento, which is, just for the buffs, is Trigger and Silver. Hi, old Silver, away! Bet no one spotted that one. It's the Lone Ranger, guys.
This was a good scene between the two, the light. And I think Russell actually did become quite emotional. You see it in him.
Yeah. Yeah, old Jarman pushed his buttons here. And so at the end, he actually gets a little bit upset. here.
Not yet.
Yeah, there it is. Gemma is such a
Here.
there it is. Gemma is such a straightforward person. Makeup, he's very, very straightforward and very honest. I think that's why that scene also worked very well with Russell, of course. The Russell it beautifully. CGI. Malta, CGI.
Yeah.
Added the road,
Yeah.
the city.
Yeah, there was no
Well,
road
the
there.
road, the walls are real. That's Malta. That's Valletta Harbour.
Yeah,
That's the real
we took
harbour
the-
walls.
yeah. This is all CGI. Now, the buildings on the right, as you hit them with the arches, are real. The wall on the left is real, and the arch is real. Everything else above that is not.
Also beautiful shot.
Yeah, this is all just showing Piccadilly Circus
The rest
Rome.
of that's real, apart from the background.
It was your idea to stack it up.
Yeah,
I mean,
make
we
it a
always said,
mess.
like Manhattan.
Yeah, I didn't want it to ever. I always thought that they looked very two-dimensional. I mean, sorry, two storied structures, and I thought, I've been a Roman. It's much more towering than that, and so we try to get this feeling of no sky, you know.
And jumbled up as well.
Yeah, just always going out of shot, and like Wall Street.
Good to see you again, old friend.
Mars.
So he does a little ritual, kisses the toe, bring me good fortune.
Bring me fortune.
Have you ever seen anything like that before?
The Colosseum, in fact, was the tallest building in Rome. At about 280 feet, I think, 300 feet.
I don't know. It's the tallest building for 1,000 years.
But
Before
how high are the pyramids?
Oh, they're I don't know.
Yeah, the biggest.
No,
of
it
the
must be about 160 feet, I think, the Colosseum. But it was the actual. I mean, if that the pyramid is a building, but I mean, this is the structure. I mean, it was tallest building till the medieval cathedrals started being built in the West.
I thought that was always a beautiful shot as well. The
Yeah.
coming out of darkness.
The moth, the bat moth, the skull, out of focus into the examination of the child, and the fact of what he is what we see here actually is affection, not sexuality, not threatening. And then you get
It's envy as well.
and then you get misinterpretation. She's wondering, what is he doing? The irony is he probably loves the child. It always kind of irritates me when some people say that it was great when he died, he was such a bad guy. And I thought, well, you missed half the point, right? Because I found he had many layers and many colors.
I will make Rome the wonder of the ages. That is what
Those powders
friends don't understand.
could be, is she poisoning her brother? And this was always going to be the subtext when he gives it to her. He glances at her and looks at the poison, and looks at the draft, the tonic, there, and then drinks it, trusts her. But it was a bit elaborate, so nobody got it. But the subtext is still there. She really is just giving him a tonic.
The celebration to honor our father. You think I should?
No, I think you get it. I think you know that she's up. Oh, is she going to do that?
You need your rest now.
But the whole idea of tasters in those days was very real. I think right even through medieval times, they would always have a taster who'd sit and eat the food before.
Mm-hmm.
Quite a nice job, actually,
Yes,
being a taster of the Emperor of Rome.
Yeah. Oh, quail again. Isn't it?
I love this turn of
Yeah.
the head. He
Yeah.
says, always.
Stay with me tonight.
Yeah, he's really in love with his sister. Initially, there was a very uncomfortable discussion about this in development, and saying, well, incest, taboo. But I think there's more implicit sexuality in the inference rather than the act. And this heads towards, I think, a scene which is, in fact, very sexual, and yet nothing occurs other than a kiss.
Well, she represents, the love that he's lacking. And so she is not only like a mother figure, a sister, and a lover, but all of them combined.
Yeah. So on the streets is accurate. They would be waylaid by, they'd be in chains, but waylaid by everyone, prostitutes, vendors, these characters at this moment were not recognized yet. They weren't Colosseum heroes. They weren't the players yet. They were unknowns. There's every miniature corner here where the gambling's happening right next to which is where I'd be. I'd be right there in the coffee bar with a cigar. And those are actual designs of tea urns that existed. Now you get this guy Cassius.
David
Hemmings of Charge of the Light Brigade, Blow Up, and many other movies. Man of many talents. Is also a great painter and magician. The eyebrows are real. And you realize that this guy's the master of ceremonies and probably manager of the arena. He's the fixer.
An old friend of Oliver, and that was Oliver's last scene.
But if you ever look at Charge of the Light Brigade, which anyone who hasn't seen it ought to have seen it, and also Blow Up, if you haven't seen it, you ought to have seen it. There you'll see the younger David Hemmings. So now we have a connection, possibly between, the son
Gladiator, are you the one they call the
at the same age as his would have been.
They said you were a giant. They said you could crush a man's skull with one hand.
Going round circles about what to call the horses on his chest. So Russell said to me,
They have good horses in Spain?
here it comes.
Best. This is Argento.
Trigger.
This is Scato.
Sorry, other way around. Silver and Trigger. He said, do you think anyone will notice? And I said, if they do, it's kind of amusing.
They let you watch the games.
My uncle says it makes me strong.
What does your father say?
My father's dead.
Master Lucius, it is time.
Now he gets a connection that this kid's an aristocrat.
Your name is Lucius?
Lucius Varus, after my father.
Now the music takes on a different tone. And Lucilla could be there because he firmly believes that Lucilla was party to his demise.
I always loved the battles of the Colosseum, and Arthur felt sad that we had to cut it down. I mean, seeing the lion cages, we had a scene in here with the
they were great.
Christians and lions that Maximus would witness, and just.
These are actually the walls within which all these bowels here existed. The stonework existed. Then Arthur put all his machines and cages in.
Elevators and what have you, big elevators.
This helmet was designed in the back of an envelope. Because we didn't want something. Yeah, we wanted something traditional, but wanted something different. This is all real. These are the gun emplacements. Those are the ramps for the old guns being towed up, the cannons. But it works perfectly for us in terms of saying that we're in the bowels and we're going to go into the arena. Put a gate on that door and you have the ramp up into the arena. And one of many ramps. You know, that arena probably had, I don't know, at least 8 ramps, service ramps in, apart from elevators. It was like a giant aircraft carrier. So all this stonework's all real. Now you come through the real arch into CGI. That's totally artificial, apart from the bottom wall, and everything above the hips or waist is CGI.
Spectacular shot. I mean,
remarkable, really. You couldn't do this shot. You couldn't do this shot at all 5 years ago, could you, John?
I don't know, but no, not I don't know, not that level of plotting. It took them a long time. I mean, it was a very expensive one. But it was one you always wanted to do, and circular again.
Here
like
it is. Yeah. Contact with David was Cassius was he's so high up. He got a real drag every time and again, popping up to say, "Can you do this? Can you do that?" So eventually, the whole communication was on a walkie-talkie. But he was marvelous. He just stood there all day in boiling heat and did his thing.
I thought the idea of using the Valerium that you built on the set the shadows and the light that they created really.
It made it really. I think, John, because we learned pretty early on the rumor that they had a velarium, i.e., stretched canvases out over the arena, which left an iris over the real Colosseum, which, if you work that with the sunlight, meant that there was the sun only touched in a circle for 15 minutes once in the entire day, so the entire crowd were always in shadow. And in fact, in one spot, the royal box never had sunlight on it. And so that was a very clever piece of engineering, because those spars must have been a minimum of, I think, probably 80 feet.
No, they were bigger than that, I think.
100 feet
I
horizontally.
think they could get them out quite a way, yeah. But the structure becomes, it's constructed like a sail on a square big ship.
Yeah. They discovered that there was a naval barracks, which of course Rome is at least 50 kilometers from Ostia, which is the coast. And they could never work out why there was naval barracks just around the corner from the Colosseum. And then they now figured, the theory was that the naval were topsail guys who would go up and you could do canvas and rope work, and they used to service the 400 beds. They could service this arena and open and close those giant canvases.
You could explain that we only had one of those gates where the carriages come out, and by the difficulty of how you had to shoot from one side to the other, and then the combination of also.
We only built about 27%, or maybe 30, whatever it was, 34% of the actual arena. Ground floor, one gate, there you have it, one gate and one royal box on the left, and 2.5 stories of what essentially, if you include the flags, a 6-story structure. So every time you see more than that, it's CGI.
Yeah, we were 60 feet high, and you nearly did 180 degrees, I think. But not quite. I mean, that's all of it. You can see there. That's just about.
But this is using the real wall and the location where he was inside a real wall there, looking into our set. There's our set with plus CGI. But it's a pretty amazing representation of probably as close as you've ever seen to the real thing.
We could maximize and give the idea of 360 degrees by flipping shots.
Just sensible use of continuity angles, changing direction. And if you build 2 boxes, one opposite the other, you build royal and senator box, you just change the draping, which is a swift change, and you can do a reverse angle. Filmmakers will know what we're talking about. Everybody else will be entirely confused. But it was, when you think about it, it's kind of logical. Just a little bit time consuming. Because you couldn't work with the light here, John. We were pretty well always at the mercy of how quickly we got the stuff we needed. So the light, of course, is always changing. So you can't be working in the eternal idyllic backlight.
No, but I mean we could, change pull the velarium in and out and change the shadows and make it feel different. And there were, it did have its own life. The shadows did shift and move. There were some shady days as well when you get good light, but generally did pretty well. And that was the other advantage of having a covered velarium. Always had a dark background. And the other thing is it turned it more into theatre. It's like a large spotlight coming down on your players, and everybody else is in the auditorium. So
have you mentioned we actually built the velarium? We had a yacht company. In fact, the same company did the Millennium Dome, were experts in high-tech sails, giant sails, and mass
structures. They did the Munich Stadium 72 Olympics. They do a lot of structural.
So they came in and said, "Yeah, we can stick this velarium round. It'll be efficient. You'll get your shadows, and of course, once we have those shadows, the mill can then pick up on those shadows and work them into their CGI. So those shadows you see, for the most part, are real." But with a giant high-tech cloth today. There's the shadows there. That's real. All this is real. Right here is real. There's no CGI here. And that cloth today is stronger than steel.
Yeah, you could walk on it.
There it is. Yeah, you could actually walk on it. Horizontal.
There are a few shots. Actually, you look straight at it. You look at the modern steel and the PVC. Fiberglass.
That was I want to mention Joaquin, a stolen shot.
Joaquin, poor thing, was sitting there all day while the big boys were shooting all this violence and macho stuff, and I always had one camera attached to Joaquin, who was either caught smoking Marlboros and looking bored to death, or occasionally And some of those shots were off the cuff, were really great. Where he actually even shrugs at the big stunt which you put in there.
Yeah,
Goes, well, that was okay.
That's all right.
You know.
Like, big.
Well, you know, when he'd do those odd things at the end of takes, though, he'd just leave the camera running. He'd
Yeah.
always pull a face or do something. Sure, if he'd thank us for it.
Barbarians lose the Battle of Carthage?
Yes, sire. Forgive me, sire.
No, I rather enjoy surprises.
This vaguely reminds me of El Cid, this shot here.
Spaniard, sire.
Hmm.
I think I'll meet him.
Yes, sire.
Again, you're looking at a fascist leader. Here's a shot. This is kind of...
That he could have taken a shot. I mean, thrown the lance at him, wanting that.
Well, that right there was an opportunity, except he's a good warrior. He knows that the chance of hitting him at that distance are almost nil. So he wants to wait. He wants to wait. So he's close to him. And whilst the story has now for a while been quite obvious what's now going to happen, eventually he will end up in the Colosseum, and of course he will certainly meet the emperor who would do this kind of thing from time to time, would bring down a deserving, come down to meet a deserving warrior or gladiator in the arena and reward him in some way.
So this is the moment he's been waiting for.
Yeah. And now you have the... He's been disarmed. He has no weapon. He's looking. There's an arrow tip. That would be good enough to drive straight through into his chest if you get near him. And by then he doesn't care because he'd die. He would be dead, but he doesn't care. This is a man who's on a mission to join his family, rejoin his family, which I think is an interesting morality subtext, which is why he could never consummate his old relationship with Lucilla because of his promise of himself for his wife and his child that he knows he will go back to. It's a very moral story. There was always this argument about having to get Maximus in the sack with Lucilla, and I said, you can't do that. It would be immoral in context of your story.
My name is Gladiator.
How dare you show your back to me? Slave!
So here we have it.
Remove your helmet and tell me your name.
He knows this is not the right moment to do it, but he has to. He's got no choice.
My name is Maximus Decimus Meridius, commander of the armies of the North, general of the Felix Legions, loyal servant to the true Emperor Marcus Aurelius, father to a murdered son, husband to a murdered wife, and I will have my vengeance.
So this is where Maximus tests his mettle with the Emperor, of course not realizing that his popularity with the crowd will save him. But he's already learned with his experience in the arena to read the crowds, so he realizes they are, in fact, an ally to him. And as long as he remains in the confines of the arena or in his role as a gladiator, he'll be safe. Where Commodus can do nothing. It would be a very unpopular decision at this moment to actually have Maximus executed in front of everybody.
He kind of has to go with the will of the crowd and audience. So win the crowd. Proximus, famous words.
I was very pleased with the cast on this. I mean, particularly the leading three, because they all have very strong presences on screen, and all look very much the part.
That was intended for Quintus, right?
Yeah, there's a look for Quintus, which is his betrayer, the person that he thought was his friend and ally. There's the shot, which is cloned or tiled or built on CGI to show
the virgins here.
Yeah, Vestal virgins.
Great looks. Yeah.
It's quite hard working on such a large canvas and trying to communicate to the individuals what we're expecting to do, and so it's always a long-range briefing where you're saying, right, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. So it literally is like playing out a scene in Wembley Stadium or the Forum in Los Angeles. Scene that we always had here, which was will be in the outtakes, was where Commodus goes down into a subterranean, probably burial room, where he stands in front of the bust of his father, and obviously was going in there to talk to his father, or the spirit of his father and the gods, and instead picks up the sword of the father and starts to hack the marble head of the father to pieces with rage.
I did what I had to do.
Which then was both amusing cut to this scene where he says, I'm vexed, because we've just seen him enraged, insanely enraged.
What did you feel?
And also,
when you saw him?
His paranoia is leaking into his system, where he's beginning to believe that his sister might not be with him.
I wounded him.
So she's now under pressure. Because of that, her son is under pressure.
Connie had a difficult role to play, between Commodus and Maximus and her alliance to whom, so very complex.
They don't respect me. How can they ever love me?
Because at the same time she was affectionately disposed to her brother naturally, but also she realized what he was and that he had to go.
Yeah, she had to move very carefully around him.
What will you do?
So from this moment on, we don't really know which side he's on. What game is he playing? Which makes it interesting, because very soon we find out where she's coming from.
This way.
Well, these are real cells, or they looked like them anyway, didn't they? They were all disused.
Yeah, I think they're probably horse boxes, or even maybe were either horse boxes or troop barracks.
Yeah, warrant officers. They were pretty grim little rooms. Not very big. There's a long run of them down the city. Well, there's the fort walls that.
Yeah, but all the texture of the walls this was all pretty well there. Arthur in this instance had to do very little. He added a teeny bit of fresco and dressing and things like that. It works very well.
I knew your brother would send assassins. I didn't realize he would send his best.
Maximus, he doesn't know.
My family was burned and crucified while they were still alive.
I knew nothing.
Don't lie to me!
I think Russell is a particularly unusual character in this, as an actor, and in that he was a very accomplished and experienced actor with, I think, over 30 theatrical, not film, theatre credits to his name, and I think now certainly in excess of 30 movies. So when we think he's a new guy and he's an overnight success, nothing is ever an overnight success. And Russell's a very hard worker, and also is blessed with a certain, a really very strong intelligence and very smart. But he's both also that as well as a physical actor, so he's got it all.
Don't you understand? Today I saw a slave become more powerful than the Emperor of Rome.
Particularly doing this kind of film with this kind of period flavor, you have to address the fact that to a degree it is theatrical, but in the best sense of the word, and that's not that easy to do. But I think Russell fell into place quite easily with it because of previous experience, probably from theatre, and whereas Joachim had to find intuitively where to go with it to cope with doing such an elaborate character.
One man above all.
Connie's passion was Roman history. This was pure coincidence, but I soon discovered that actually she knew more about the Roman Empire than anyone, including the advisors. So she was always a fund of information.
Then have him kill Commodus!
I knew a man once. A noble man. A man of principle who loved my father. And my
This scene was actually built out of 2 different scenes, right?
Yeah, shot a month apart. No, shot, yeah, a month apart.
Or we had shot the scene one way and then went back and elaborated the...
minus some certain information. Or from a man who... we were minus the lines referring to her father, right?
Right.
And right here we think there's, again, once again, there's the tangible, you know, emotional contact between them. And once again he cuts it off.
It's funny that this particular snake scene was initially in Morocco with the prison guards, but I thought it was a good idea to place it here to show, you know, what the gladiators do with passing their time. Crazy game.
Little gold.
You actually you mentioned that was actually a real.
That's a real cobra, yeah. Fully loaded.
Came with the charm and everything. Yeah. But he was one of the players there. But yeah, he was trying to bite them.
General!
Here's Rolf's shot at comedy, which actually worked out better than I thought it would. The food could easily be poisoned.
I still laugh, you know, after months and months of seeing that.
Rolf's very proud of that scene. I'm very proud of Rolf for pulling that off.
You have a great name. He must kill your name before he kills you.
In a way, here in this is like the beginning of the third act in a funny kind of way, because you now have everything is out in the open, and there are 2 protagonists. There's Commodus, there's Maximus, and of course there's the additional party to all this. That's the crowd, and the crowd are controlling everything. There's a view to Maximus's popularity. As long as he's popular, he's safe.
This was to show his generosity towards the crowd. And
his beneficence. As sometimes, this is true, as a game, Commodus would, you know, throw bread to the crowd, which is of course a staple of the lower classes in Rome. And as a joke, sometimes he'd have snakes in the baskets of bread, so he'd throw bread and snakes into the crowd. Harmless snakes, but it scared the living daylights out of them to begin with, till they realized they were grass snakes. But that was one of his little jokes. And of course, here's the character we'd totally forgotten about, who in a way becomes a key to the problem of Maximus. And here we have his Batman, his servant from the German front, who, if you want to argue how did he get there, probably because he's on leave. And therefore, would you visit Rome if you got the opportunity? Absolutely. It was the center of the universe, very multinational city. In those days, which had a permanent population of over 1 million people, which is pretty big by any standards, and for those days is enormous. And so my argument was that why couldn't he visit Rome? And whilst he was in Rome, he either heard about this general, Maximus, and felt that could that be the same person? And he visits, and of course there it is. He is.
Marcus Aurelius is dead, Maximus. We mortals are but shadows and dust.
This line we used as, to help us create an ending for Proximo. And so that shot where he looked up and at the sky, we used later when he is assassinated by Praetorians, a CGI sequence to basically put the Proximo character to rest.
They embrace him like he's one of their own.
The mob is fickle, brother. He'll be forgotten in a month.
No, much sooner than that. been arranged.
This is where I noticed that Joaquin was putting on weight. And so one day I talked to the line producer, Branco, or the producer, Branco Lustig, saying, you know, he's putting on weight. And of course, Branco went straight to him and said, Rudy says you're fat.
Branco discreet as ever.
Immediately, the next day, he walks up to me, Commodus, Joaquin, in his full regalia and armor. He says, I hear I look like a little fat hamster. He then didn't eat any food for weeks. He said, I thought it was the right thing to do. I said, here I am back in Rome as the emperor. Why wouldn't I look a little bit more debauched? I said, well, you look better, you know, with a few pounds off.
Well, you look good there. It's decadent.
Well, that's what he's reaching for, the decadence. That's not CGI, that's real. That's real. That's not.
Well, it was a composite. I mean,
but that tiger coming out the ground was real, where he falls, and the door opened and out came the tiger. And we thought this is going to be easy, and then of course, one of the most dangerous things about these tigers is that when you call out action, they just would stroll away, lie on the ground, and lick their paws. Which doesn't mean to say that you've got to be really careful, because that's when they're the most dangerous, because you think that they are in repose and really are cuddly kind of teddy bears. They're not. They're 600 pounds of muscle and teeth and can move in a flash. In fact, one set about stuntman had him on the ground in a split second, and they were all over it trying to get him off. Unfortunately, he wasn't hurt. But it was a reawakening. It was a wake-up call to say, just don't relax, because these tigers look relaxed.
Well, that's real, but that's the trainer, right?
That's the trainer where the tiger leaps on him.
And he got a bit chewed as well.
Yeah, that was part of his job. He got chewed. The tiger actually gave him a gentle nip on his arm where he had a steel cuff. And the cuff was there to protect his arm, but the tooth went straight through the cuff and left a hole in his arm about the size of a quarter.
I thought this was probably the most difficult scene to not only shoot, but also to put together. Just the difficulty to working with tigers, and just remember all the tricks that they tried to get them to do things, first with horses and then chickens and ultimately pigeons, to get the tigers aggressive.
Yeah, it was very frustrating. I mean, how long we were on it? I don't know, maybe
about 3 weeks. I mean, going back several times with second unit, shooting tigers in front of blue screen, compositing them with the actors. And
I mean, they'd start quite well in the day when they were hungry, but then after they'd had a
few bites,
few chump steaks, they were just like, oh, whatever.
Disinterested, because it was hot as well. It was very hot, and this arena reached well over 100 for the most of the time.
I felt
we had a couple of Praetorians fainting.
I thought the Maltese extras were great. I mean, their faces. Also,
Yeah, they're full of character.
Yeah.
They're always entertaining themselves, singing songs or doing something.
So now he defies the emperor once again. Maximus the Merciful. Everyone laughs. So now he's really pushing his luck. It was tricky, this, because we had, of course, the animal right and the animal protection groups, or whatever that was in Malta, always hanging around, assuming there was going to be bad behavior on our behalf. And essentially, part of them were in that crowd, so they were always looking for an opportunity to see what we might do to the tigers, can you believe, to make them perform. And so we had to be very careful about what we did.
What am I going to do with you?
I always felt this scene was taken out of any classical Western. It was a high noon showdown.
Are we so different, you and I?
This is where Commodus crosses the line and becomes pretty well
as I do.
abhorrent for most people. This is where he goes all out to taunt Maximus.
He wants him. He says, do it now. He wants him to do something, knowing that
He'll get cut down. If he attacked the Emperor, he would get cut down instantly.
Your son
So now comes the insult.
squealed like a girl when they nailed him to the cross. And your wife moaned like a whore when they ravaged her. Again and again.
And this is where the score helps to play the internalization of Maximus, who keeps his strength and keeps his temper
will soon be at an end.
by just thinking of his wife and his child. So there's the family theme.
Highness.
So much just done with looks. I think they were all really, I was very happy with all the cast. They were great. And here we have his old servant waiting for him. Now Maximus is a kind of escorted celebrity prisoner. If you
It's
like
like a boxer,
yeah,
entering the ring.
yeah. But now he's kind of lauded and celebrated, and in Roman history, it was like this. In fact, even more so. A lot of these gladiators actually earned their freedom and ended up as quite wealthy landowners and moved on to other things. Here's a milestone device, because there's the family from the tent in Germany who took it. Of course, the servant, because he thought he'd never see Maximus again, the memento.
I was surprised to see the audience when we had previews reacting to that. I mean, fully knowing what it meant. And
Your family in the afterlife.
Oh, yes.
What do you say to them?
To my boy. I tell him I will see him again soon. To keep his heels down when he's riding his horse. To my wife. That is not your business.
Very nice scene between him and
Now
Jaime.
they love Maximus for his mercy. So I
That got
can't
a
just
big
kill him,
laugh.
what makes me even more unmerciful.
You see the breath on his lips here, which shows how cold it was at night. And of course, that's how it would be. There would be fires and braziers, but they didn't close it up. So they must have kind of wrapped up with undergarments. But they must have been fairly Spartan, fairly tough.
Yeah. Well, this was the open space he used again, and there's the senators based in the palace.
Yeah, so we just used it again.
another, yeah.
Again and again, and the mistake that a lot of people make is say, no, this scene is somewhere else, so I must build a set to be somewhere different. And in fact, we worked this set 6 times, I think, in different views. Yeah.
This time I had a fish pond in the middle, but we don't actually see that with this.
All we did here was drop curtains, and it suddenly becomes a different arcade.
Little bites of it, and yet it remains still.
So in the outtakes or the out scenes, this is where the whole spy system will kick in. And it was all one of the sequences I was sorry to see go, because it again showed a little more of Roman life on the streets and the infrastructure and the networking that Commodus did and had as like a secret police, really, which of course logically must have existed.
Cicero, my old friend. I thought perhaps I'd seen you for the last time. I thought you were dead. Close. How long have the men been in Ostia?
Oh, winter.
How do they look?
Fat and bored.
Who's in command?
Some fool from Rome.
How soon do you think they could be ready to fight?
For you, tomorrow.
I need you to do something for me.
Center of the set Well, we built this foot of the Colossus, and unfortunately we only ever saw it once. There it is in the background. The person on the left there doing his little rhetoric is in fact the casting director, Billy, who always does my small parts and crowd casting. I think this is now the 4th film with him. So as a form now, I always give him a little part to do, which he loves to do.
And I serve the General Maximus. I serve him still. Stop. Stop. Stop.
No carriages in those days except giant wagons, so it tended to be this form of chair that probably later we call a sedan chair. But always moving everywhere with guards and an entourage.
Leave us. Senator Gracchus?
I felt this is what Connie was very good at, was actually holding her own with, you know, very strong masculine characters. She had her own authority and therefore commanded, you believe that she commanded that kind of respect.
The Senate is with you?
The Senate? Yes. I can speak for them.
You can buy my freedom and smuggle me out of Rome.
To what end?
Get me outside the city.
Derek was great in his role, and I saw that the scene that we lost, you know. Sad to see it go.
Yeah, the senator scene, yeah. With Connie and the 2 senators.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really loved that. It'll be in the out scene section, won't it?
It will be, yeah. It's just background, you know, story and politics, but he just always has such great presence, you know.
Mm. Well, you felt then he was.
I love the set as well. I missed the set. Love the staircase in the room. But you can, if you switch to another section, you can see that.
The soldiers will stay for your protection under the command of the Senate.
So, once all of Rome is yours, you'll just give it back to the people. Tell me why.
Because that was the last wish of a dying man. I will kill Commodus.
So here's a place where you see, of course, the words reinforcing and rebonding these 2 characters, which is Maximus and Lucilla. But of course the music does that as well, so it's a very beautiful underscore.
I will trust you. But we have little time. Give me 2 days, and I will buy your freedom. And you stay alive, or I'll be dead. Now we must go.
And you did kill him, didn't you? You did kill Derek at one stage.
Yeah, Derek was destined to die and go out like Caesar, and we didn't know whether eventually to kill him or not. But here you have the paranoia kicking in now, because of course Proximo can't trust anyone, can't trust his guards. So he has brought Maximus up to his apartments, which are in the prison, above the prison. And these all existed, these buildings, and what Arthur did was simply add fresco, but the fresco is pretty great. Looks totally real. And much to my surprise, we tried to persuade the Maltese authorities to leave everything standing, but not so much that it would save me money to take it down, but I was very sad to see the whole thing taken down. And I think if somebody had been very sharp about this, they could have turned this into a fairly major site for, you know, one of a better expression, not exactly a theme park, but certainly a Roman theme, which was large enough to generate quite a business, but at the same time would be very informative, because all these interiors and streets, I think, were a pretty good representation of what it was like.
Yeah, I think there was a sort of talk about them regretting that, but it did come down very quickly. We were shooting and it was Franco was destroying it as we went, and it came down so quick.
Now this is in the walls. There were many locations in Malta which are just magnificent. which range from Saracen times to Renaissance. These are real walls, and all we did here was put gravel on the ground and put up the 4 columns and the busts. Those the columns supporting the busts, and here's the reusing for film students. This is just once again the throne room, all we did was move all the furniture out and put the bed in the middle. So it's exactly the same room, which we used 4 or 5 times.
And you did put that wall up behind it, the filigree.
Yeah. We'd pre-made the filigree panels to drop them between the columns, so it was like a 5th use of the room. And so this now became the royal bedchamber. And I think this is a fairly sexual scene, without ever going further than a kiss. But she's prepared to do anything at this juncture to distract him. Unfortunately, he just can't go through with it. So in a way, this is, on the part of Lucilla, as a kind of scene of sacrifice.
It's a dream. A frightful dream.
But also she's being always dragged into sympathy for the brother, even despite now his extreme bad behavior. She still loves him. That's her predicament as a brother.
And I have only you to share it with.
Probably coming out of no mother and a father who was never there and therefore never really understood him.
Still very dangerous for her.
Oh, very dangerous. Oh, she's ready for the sacrifice here, which she doesn't really want to go that direction, but she knows it's a distraction here. And it's also by doing that, allowing herself for this, that theoretically it tells him that he's still on her side, but he's so complex, he's also beginning to suspect that there's something not quite right about this. Why she's so suddenly complicit. There's always shifting paranoia between the two parties.
It's great how you ended it. I mean, he doesn't kiss her, he can't.
Can't do it.
Can't do it.
Music picks up. Now the change of energy. She's going to take a huge risk and go back to Maximus and say he's got to go now. That's the exterior of the walls that we had, and we put up columns and made small pantheons into the prison.
Get out! Move!
So now he's been bought.
Congratulations, General. You've got very persuasive friends.
Proximo's always the old villain rascal, because this deal would probably cost her a few vineyards, a lot of land, and not just a bag of gold. This would be quite a power change here to allow her to get him to do this.
Be waiting there with horses.
You have done all this?
Yes,
You risk too much.
I have much.
So here's the only love scene we have in the film between them, which I resisted them going to hitting the sack. Said it's wrong. I think it's better without.
For being strong. My brother hates all the world, and you most of all.
Because your father chose me.
No, because my father loved you.
So all the characters retain their dignity.
I loved you.
And he is still free to return to his wife and child.
Was
was I very different then?
You're laughable.
Russell's again interesting because he can also bring off this kind of tenderness, which, you know, gives him the full range of everything he ever may need to do and make it all believable and emotional. I think at this juncture, one of the things we haven't really talked about, which is in many respects the most important thing of all, which is the script. And everything really, at the end of the day, is about material, script. And if you have the script, making of the movie, the physical making of the movie, given the fact you're with a professional group, is relatively straightforward and extremely enjoyable, and a lot of rock and roll. In this instance, with such a large project, it was an act of faith on everybody's part to go into a project of, you know, pretty large budget, where we knew during the process we would be transforming the script from an original piece of material by David Franzoni, which gave us the actual map, the blueprint of the story, but had no center act. And what I've always felt from the beginning was we needed the center act, we needed the journey. Franzoni's script went from the German front and then straight into Rome, and I felt we were far too long in Rome and far too long using up the power of the stadium. And so I said, well, what about his journey? His journey must take us through anywhere we want, which could be through the North African provinces, where one could assume you'd have a lot of these slave camps and developments of where, you know, from slaves to gladiators, etc., etc. And so that's how the first step came about with John Logan, who came in next. And I'd met John through a script I wanted to have written for me it was eventually made. It was called RKO 281, and John I brought in as a playwright from Chicago, and he wrote the story based on the Battle of Citizen Kane. So I knew John, and between Walter and I, we discussed it and thought, well, John would be a good choice. And John was brought in and, in fact, then did the next pass, where he largely directed his attention to the center act. Germany was always kind of there, give or take, with some dialogue changes. The center act didn't exist, and then there was a reconforming of the whole last act in Rome, although we did constantly keep up, or at least I did constantly keep up, the references, which are very colorful, by David Franzoni's original draft as to the life and times of these characters, which he was fairly well researched. John came in, did a draft, and the draft was extremely good, and we now had a good blueprint to proceed. And some areas we're still not quite turning the screw on some of the characterization and the political subtext that occurred when we particularly hit the Rome. And so William Nicholson, who's probably best known for a play that turned into a movie by Attenborough, which was called Shadowlands, and William came in and did some editorial work, editorial advisory work, and some dialogue sequences, and this was an ongoing process throughout the making of the film. So Walter Parks and I used to have extremely close contact on a nightly basis, where eventually it got down to a basic, very simple email. I'd get home and find I've got 9.5 miles of fax lying on the floor, so I'd write replies on it, stick it back in, and instead of saying dear to Ridley Scott, I just changed it to Walter Parks, file it back. So it was like there's this vision of me pulling this large amount of paper being tugged backwards and forwards across the Atlantic. But it was, it worked. And I think during the process of the construction of the screenplay, there was Doug Wick, who was the originator of the project, I think, with David Franzoni, and all of us around a table were very, very constructive discussions. I think everybody had one thing in mind, that was to make the film better. And of course, that's what occurred. So I think that team effort, you know, really largely kept us in the right direction and to turn out this piece of material.
This particular scene with Proximo was actually a result of that process, where both writing, editing, and the fact that Oliver had died, how to bring him back by using the shots, the material already shot, and writing a scene around it, a final scene for Oliver Reed.
Yeah, it's very skillful, really, on your two parts to bring that out, you know, because we were stuck then. I seem to remember we didn't, you know, you were coming in very tired, having nights of faxing and stuff, and didn't really know what we were going to do at this stage.
Well, it was like having several pieces of a jigsaw puzzle with several pieces missing. But again, in all of this, and I'm not really just saying this because it's a DreamWorks project, but the actual close contact with the studio was always very civilized and extremely supportive, and I enjoyed it. I mean, on what could have been on such a large project logistically, it was always extremely well in hand, and we would always predetermine possible problems, and so from my point of view, it was probably one of the best experiences I've had in the last, you know, maybe 15 years.
Here again, using existing sets.
Yeah, this was
existing stuff. These were sort of escape
tunnels.
tunnels. I don't know what they were. Yeah.
These were powder holes. These were for ammunition, and probably from the early 19th century would be gunpowder, and then probably later leading to, you know, high explosives.
Yeah, air raid shelters and what have you on the second one.
Yeah. These are all real staircases leading up to back to the apartment, and here's the demise of, with a double on the back, and then a head taken from the arena put onto the double's body. Proximo is stabbed. Rolf wanted a good death and he got it. He said 2 arrows in the front. I said, no, you're going to get 4, mate. 2 in the back, 2 in the front.
And this place is amazing. This is the walls to Valletta, the actual land side to Valletta. Enormous trenches dug by Turkish slaves. Huge, huge scale to this.
That hurt.
Yes.
He actually bounced and hit the tree. It's pretty hairy having 4 arrows, you know, driven into your chest, and where you're hanging on by the neck. And I'm saying to him, don't worry, it's all going to be all right. And he'd say, are you sure? And these archers are standing at about 4 feet. And they drive those arrows into your padding on your chest.
It's done.
That was a hard shot to struggle with, this balcony shot, a view of idyllic Rome. And it should have been simple, but it wasn't.
But this looks great. I mean,
now it looks fine. Yeah, it took a long time, though.
Yeah.
God.
But a lot of that is Malta, though. A lot of the existing buildings you've used for.
And those 2 towers on the left are Maltese, and they kept saying, "Don't these look out of period?" And I said, "It doesn't matter. We love it." So we're very aware of the 2 domes on the left are Maltese, and they're probably about 800 years out. But we know that.
And there's the hospital there.
So back. Here we are in what was the bedroom again, and we've simply emptied the room and reused it once again. And you know what? You don't really know.
If she decides to be noble and takes her own life, he will die.
Love this speech, this complexity of this man's mind,
As for you,
trapping her into a dilemma that there is no choice, there is no way out. I always thought this was a great Dracula shot.
you will provide me with an heir.
At one stage, I was actually seriously thinking of putting him on a little trolley and tracking him forward, so as if he never walked, but just floated towards her.
I'm not merciful.
Great reaction from her.
Yeah, I remember Joaquin asking me, he said, how the scene turned out and which merciful did I use, the soft one or the hard one? And I said I used both.
Yeah, I love that there.
Yeah.
He hasn't won anything. And all he's done is lost his sister.
Great look on her.
So from this moment, the film starts to get kind of quite operatic, which I think is a good description of the overall movie. Although it's a word you don't want to really use in marketing, you scare everybody off. But when Stephen first saw it, he said, "My God, it's an opera." And he said, "But I mean that." He said, "I mean that in the best way," which was kind of nice because, in a way, it is. It's almost operatic in its story and scope.
But I was thinking the image of him hanging there in the chains is very Christ-like. So the themes of Christ are the martyr, sacrificing yourself for the better good of the crowds.
And Joaquin looking like a total bizarre sort of marble statue, the white makeup.
Yeah, Janty took this statue from. There's a very beautiful alabastine, full-size figure of not Commodus but another emperor, which is in one of the better books on Rome, and the lighting on it is absolutely beautiful. And
glows, isn't it?
yeah, and we thought, well, why gold? People were saying gold, and I thought, well, why not white? So we'll make him white, but to suit his complexion, his skin, which is very white now and sallow.
You would fight me.
So he's almost like a statue.
Why not? Do you think I'm afraid?
I think you have been afraid all your life.
It's a nice construction
Unlike
of words
Maximus
here.
the Invincible, who knows no
About his
fear.
father.
I knew a man who once said death smiles at us all. All a man can do is smile back.
It's a quote from Marcus Aurelius.
I wonder, did your friend smile at his own death?
You must know. He was your father.
You loved my father, I know.
Even now I feel sorry for him. For Commodus. He's not a two-dimensional villain, he's a four-dimensional human being.
Strap on his armor. Conceal the wound.
Beautiful.
Yeah, this is great. So Hans took the words of Marcus Aurelius and turned them into this rather operatic score section here, which is beautiful. It's like a resurrection. There's the shadows from our Valerian working a storm.
Here's the
using the old military tortoise configuration with the shields, which we saw on the German front.
Where did the idea of the pedals come, really? Using pedals?
Yeah, it was always there. I'd used them in Legend, so I thought I haven't used them for ages. I may as well use them again.
But that was the elevator.
Didn't
wasn't
work
it?
in Legend. Worked here.
This was the elevator that we'd had in the other place. But then he went down. How deep did it go? Yes, 4 feet, 6 feet. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
they're just head height.
Yeah, they had to.
We hit rock bottom. We couldn't get any deeper. Here we got the theme, the mortality theme, the family theme. This is something I always held my breath on, as to take a fight, first of all, between an omnipotent warrior and who's now practiced gladiator, and a prince is a bit incredible. But I think the stiletto into the kidneys is a good starting point to
Good handicap, yeah.
good handicap to weaken him. So essentially, he's internally bleeding from the moment he did it. And you can almost imagine Commodus consulting a physician as to the best point to hit for his little research before that encounter. But actually, Joachim surprised the hell out of me by really getting to it with this rehearsal on his swordplay, and I think he did absolutely great. But then, gradually, we're going to dovetail that into his demise and eventual death, and God help me, going to Heaven's Gate. And on paper, that looks really dodgy. Here he comes, here's the first. Again, I think here's the power of the score. I mean, notwithstanding everything that the actors are doing first rate, but also the score is now starting to really work first rate as well. So it's underscoring the emotional demise and what's about to happen to him. So this was always an awkward moment because he's going to stop and give up. So why doesn't Commodus attack him? So you have to invent that on the spot, saying, well, they won't give him a sword, but there he has a stiletto. He comes in. You've seen the gate. I always felt that death ought to be a close death, intimate death, with almost a degree of regret from Maximus that he has to do this.
And great disbelief from Joaquin, who thinks he's a god now, doesn't he? He thinks his eyes are...
Till the moment arrives when you get the old prick on your neck, and then it all changes. I think you did that great, absolutely great.
That's a beautiful shot, stillness now.
Yeah, the silence I like, that we took all the sound out.
Always bothered me, that guy standing there scratching his head, do you see? I wanted to run up there and punch him, you know. And he was told to stand still, but I even thought about taking him out in the CGI.
I know, you hated that shot.
The guy is scratching his head. How can you do that? This man just lying on the Prince of Darkness is lying on the ground and he's scratching his head.
Well, he put money on him, maybe.
Yeah. Here we've got Heaven's Door, which in fact is the wall in the orchard in his home. This is what it would probably be. And he'd been through here many times. And there it is. That's probably his home.
This is wrong.
Maximus. Maximus.
But that's the avenue the Praetorians rode down that he's looking up, isn't it?
That's where his son died, yeah.
And that small church at the end. I don't know where you got that from.
But the idea that with today's technology, we could have done all kinds of swirling, rushing down tubes of light and slit scan that Doug Trumbull invented, actually, and they haven't got any better since 2001, which is still the best way of doing it. And we thought, no, let's just tell the story very simply, the way it is. And suddenly you hit the first image of the movie, which is the hands on the grass, so you start to get it. You go, that's when you emotionally confirm, that what's about to happen. And you get transition, which is where you got close to that in the desert, him gliding over the ground. I wanted the same feeling of passing on.
The idea of
right
transcendence.
Yeah, floating away,
just moving. But that's just, again, on the old trolley, on the deck. Just a funny sensation. So there he's going. last day's shooting in Tuscany.
Last shot, just about.
Now, all these, sometimes these very simple things on paper are a bit scary, where she just says you're home or go to them. But that's where you're really looking very strongly towards the, capability of the actress or actor. And I think she really held her own throughout this whole process. She did very well.
Is Rome worth one good man's life?
Even the authority here is imperious. She's like an emperor, empress.
Make us believe it again. He was a soldier of Rome. Honor him.
Look what her father said at the beginning. What Caesar you would have been. Probably a great one.
Here's an interesting thing here. We had a slightly different cut from now on, where we did an absolute match dissolve to an empty arena and then held the empty arena, and then a little figure walks in, but it was too long. We need to get to it. So we go back to the theme, one of the themes, thematics of which is family, being buried on the spot that he died.
In the blood.
In the bloody, the dried out blood, soil. And now he has the final word.
I will see you again. But not yet. Not yet.
It's beautiful, empty.
It's all CGI now. And these three hillocks, two are from Provence. One is on the left is Oped, the other one on the right is Goude or something, and the rest is a bit of painting, and the sky is from France. I think I've tried to actually talk about as many people as I can who are all important to this movie. Everyone had their, input. There was no passengers on this team, and I think really, the final word should go to Walter Parks and Doug Wick, for being such good supportive producers. And also DreamWorks as part in the process.